waiting to do an exam.
Seriously.
I was never any good at those.
No,
We've actually underneath the counter is just got suspender belts and stockings. You know, is that the kind of news you mean?
We like it. It's essential. Don't you touch me, sir. I mean, who the fuck are you? Do even attempt to tell me what to do? Your existence in this time is sick, told and cruel. Now get your fucking hands off me. You stole my life, boss. It's you who kills the children. You who rapes the aura. Well, everything that lives created virtual. Get a scorer. Get the fuck away from me. You know how to do some scum. You're alien to my life. Take pictures of everyone. Don't you touch me, sir. I mean, who the fuck are you? Do even attempt to?
Allow yourself to explore elements of your memories, say an event, a song, a smell, that connects significant moments in your life. Allow your memories to exist spatially, with related elements connecting significant moments from your past together. What steps, people, things in your past, good, bad, distant past, or perhaps a moment just gone, what has brought you here today? I'm going to ask you all soon to think of 10 memories, good or bad, that have led you to your place in the DIY art scene, in the band itself, perhaps the instrument you play, and then also just being here today. I want you to draw something like this kind of shape. Just to reflect on those thoughts, I would like you to draw little dots, just 10, like this, representing, again, the event when it took part in your life, and if it was a good memory or a bad one. That makes sense for everybody? How do you join?
Right, so Rites of Hadda, I was initially, I wouldn't say I was their #1 fan, but I have been at gigs where I've been the only person there watching them, dancing. I was the #1 fan that particular night. I'm in another band called Spirit of the Age. When we sort of both first started around 2014, I sort of started promoting other bands, and I got into just trying to go, well, look, you know, let's get a DIY thing going where we build a network of people. And the idea of the network is basically that we go, look, if we get 3 or 4 bands that all just want to play and are all got really good around each other, you know, all feel good and comfortable with each other. You're not in it to, you know, to say I need loads of money to come and do this, you know, let's try and get venues that don't cost us much money and things like that and try to get stuff going, ideally free entry. There was a point in Rites of Hadda where the bass player changed, like, you know, their former bass player didn't want to continue at that point, and I was asked because I'd been to most of the gigs, and you know, as being #1 fan, obviously, and I knew the songs, you know, and so that was around 2019 when I actually joined Rites, but they were about 5 years old by then. But definitely, there's a definite DIY ethic with Spirit of the Age and Rites of Hadda, and I think we gelled quite well together in the early days. So that's why I think I was approached to play the bass, unless no one else would do it. I don't know. You know, perhaps I don't. Who knows? I've never asked the rest of the band. Perhaps you can get. Perhaps you can ask.
That's why I'm here today.
Well, singing is probably a rather generous description. I've always been really aware of my limitations singing, although as a child I was the lead in all the school plays and I was involved in that kind of performing. I didn't feel very confident singing. How I ended up singing was, actually, I can't even remember what year it was now. About 8 or 9 years ago I was diagnosed with a form of blood cancer, and that was a really shocking moment, as you might imagine. And after, in the wake of that, I just decided to do things that I wouldn't have had the confidence to do before, or I wasn't getting round to. I was jolted into action. And actually I was worried I was going to die, but I mean, looking back, that was a kind of a a reaction, because people were telling me I wasn't going to. But when you have been really ill for a long period of time and then you get a diagnosis like that, you are questioning your own mortality. So basically the following 2 years I did everything that I had on my bucket list, and one of them was start a band. I'm still not comfortable calling myself a singer. Actually, I'd always say front person, because I'm a performer really. I've got about 3 notes, but I've got octaves and octaves of drama queen. So it's, I know how to use those notes. So yeah, that's really how I find myself here.
When Rites were in need of their 4th drummer?
3rd or 4th, I can't remember.
I had been to the squad with Tom, who by now was the bassist of Rites, and I went to the squad, and you were doing like you were rehearsing, and you rehearsed the Horned God, and I was like, okay, I really want to play drums for this.
Rites of Hadda formed, as Matthias said. So we used to be in a street punk band, which when Matthias took over in drums, then Tom joined the band on bass, and Tom was a really good bassist. And always to we were never very good, but we played an awful lot of gigs, an awful lot of terrible gigs. Tuesday night at the Comedy Club in Leicester Square, every Wednesday for 2 months at Tommy Flynn's in Camden, where the only people that showed up were mates of ours that were probably trying to score weed. It was awful, but it was a lot of fun. Tom at the same time had met Wasp in the squat in around Finsbury Park, and so they sort of started a thing, and I think this all formulates around the timeline that Wasp gave. They were starting off writing lyrics, and Tom was just there and jamming and stuff like that. So Rites of Hadda came into fruition that way, and then suddenly they had a couple of gigs booked, and one was at the Plough and Harrow in Leytonstone, and the other one was in Brighton. And a few days before the gig, I got a phone call from Tom, totally panicking, going like, "Our guitarist just disappeared. Can you learn a few songs like in a couple of days' time?" Basically, because I'd played with Tom before, it was totally fine. I mean, relatively simple music, and I still managed to butcher it, but that was fine.
Still butchering it today, Alex.
Still butchering it today. As Matthias said, through a succession of things, we started off as a 7-piece band.
Actually, we were 8, but the 8th person never performed live. They were too nervous. So it was only 7 on stage, but there was 8 of us.
We had a ghost musician for a while.
And coincidentally, Spirit of the Age and Rites of Hadda met at the Plough and Harrow.
Well, exactly.
And that was so my initial band, or not my initial band, but my band. So I became a fan. So there's some synergies in there.
Yeah.
Got back into playing music. I joined an improvising choir and started making improvised vocal music, which was something I'd never thought I would do, and that just reignited the spark of making music again. Meanwhile, I was playing cricket, and the cricket club, Matthias came and joined the cricket club that I'd been with for 25 years. So I got to know, we became friends, and he played in a band, so I came to see the band, got to know the people a bit, and then invited myself in to jam with them at the rehearsal place a couple of times, and it seemed to go quite well. It sort of went from there. I sort of gradually inched my way into the band.
Space, the people, the influential interactions that form that stepping stone towards your current person. And now release those memories from your heart. Open your eyes and then pick those 3 starting points and start free writing. Allow it to be a stream of consciousness. It's not a narrative, it's just the first thing to come to your mind for each of these significant memories.
Yeah, when I first moved to UK, actually, I moved to the UK in '99 without really having a fucking plan what I was doing here. It was just get the hell out of Norway, which at the time was a shithole. It was really fucking boring. But yeah, it was a hurdle. I mean, it was a hurdle in the sense that, you know, I'd moved here from a different country, so I didn't know much of, like, I didn't know anyone here, I didn't know the scene itself. We kind of created a bit of our own scene. We were squatting at the time as well, so it took a while to accumulate, like, mates and, you know, to get into kind of more of a community musically. As
Well, I'll go back a long way actually. I heard all that relating to my playing music. I'd been playing saxophone a year or two, and I was playing in a band with some friends, and I thought I was getting quite good. And I thought, the Guildhall School of Music, we're doing a little summer school. You go in for a week and they teach you all sorts of stuff. I thought this sounded a great way to learn a bit more and become a proper player. And it turned out most of the other students were school kids or school leavers who'd been playing in school bands, and they could all read music and all knew this, so they couldn't improvise or couldn't do anything but what was written in front of them. So the whole course was based on teaching these people to move away from the written stuff. And I couldn't read and note music, I hadn't got the faintest idea about any of that. And I basically can go from being the most accomplished player in the group, I became the dunce of the class, because I was the one who couldn't do anything, and I couldn't even follow the instructions because they said play this note and I didn't know what it was. So it completely overwhelmed me. By the time I came out of that, I just thought, this is not for me, I can't do this, I'm useless. I can only do this, I can fake a little thing at a gig and a little local thing, but I can't really play. And so it took me a long time to get over that. And in fact, it was one of contributing reasons I stopped playing for several decades. And I only got back into it later, much later.
Mid to late 80s, and formed a band, and it was a lot of, you know, oh, we've got to rehearse, we're gonna write music, and we're gonna, you know, I say write music, I use that term loosely. Get into this rut where every band that I was in those early days, just wanted to rehearse, because we're not actually good enough to go and play live. And that's not true. But, you know, you hit a wrong note and you beat yourself up about it because you've hit a wrong note, because you want to improve. But actually, what I think prevents a lot of people getting out there and doing music, there was this this belief that people weren't good enough, when actually, yeah, they could have gone out there and done that.
I feel really strongly I probably should have been performing my whole life, but I didn't for a period of about 20 years, probably because of confidence, really. Actually, as a child, I was really into doing all the plays and everything, but then at secondary school, when homophobia hit, that really knocked my confidence, to be honest. And also it distracted me and undermined me and undermined what I was good at, because it affected me so deeply, and I was just worried about my safety a lot. So and then I got distracted with all sorts of other things, like drugs, and a lot of activism and squatting and partying a lot, organising illegal raves, and I did a lot of that for a long time. I mean, obviously you're performing, you know, life's a little stage of micro performances. I mean, when you're doing activism, you're performing all the time. You're performing all sorts of roles. When you're organising a rave, you're talking to the police, you're dealing with dickheads. Do you know what I mean? But if I hadn't had my health diagnosis, I probably still wouldn't be performing now, because I lost myself and I lost my confidence in all that. Like, in a lot of distractions that they were enjoyable distractions. I'm not, you know, I wasn't flailing around worrying about myself too much. But you know, it was, yeah. So I had to re-find myself, and that's what the diagnosis, my health diagnosis, did for me. Really, it put into sharp focus what I needed to do going forward and what I needed to leave behind. And I knew one of the things I had to do was perform. Without sort of going into details, I've had quite an interesting and possibly violent life. So, well, you don't. I mean, you know, like there's and I've lived quite an edgy life in what I've done. That's just kind of naturally who I am. But when you're younger, you don't realise what you're doing too much, and the older you get, the more perspective you get. And I look back at it now and think, fuck me, I was mental. But you know, like from that, I've got a lot inside to express, and a lot of experiences, and yeah, I mean, you've struck, basically, it's just a wank fest, isn't it? So it's there's lots there that people relate to. And I think that surprised me a lot, as I've gone off on a tangent a bit, but that surprised me a lot. I wasn't expecting people would be able to relate to it because it is kind of niche.
Well, the only thing I really needed to learn how to play is that basic dun da do do da dun da do do da. So it just became, that's my drumming now. But I kind of accept it, and in fact, like when I drum in Rites, I always try to make my drums follow Wasp's journey through the songs, and I feel really comfortable playing what I play with the crappy technique that I've got.
We'll be expanding upon one of the 3 memories to make that into a longer piece, so I say 10 minutes just to write that down. Take these 3 significant moments and visualise them thoroughly. Take that one key significant memory from those 3 and you're going to place that visualisation within your aura.
I have a friend called Pilar, and she's a Spanish person, and she's used to live in London, but she's moved back to Spain. And I know her, we were in the same coven together for many years, we're both pagans practicing queer paganism. And when I was going through my diagnosis those years ago, she really saw that I was struggling and really was not just supporting me through what was a really hard emotional time and physically an emotional time for me, but also she took me to a house in Leighton one day and played the piano. She played Fear of Freedom by the Poison Girls, which is a song we both know, and we sang it together, and it was really the first time she gave me the confidence and nurtured me in so many ways. It wasn't just her who was like looking after me spiritually and emotionally in those days, but it was her who really instilled the confidence in me that I could sing or make noise from my mouth and it wasn't too bad. I've just been sitting with that moment for a little while in that room in her house there in Leighton with the keyboard and really sharing that song together. And the Poison Girls are a really important band to me anyway, and to her. And it was just really pivotal. I mean, Pilar was at some of the first jams we had at the squat I used to live in, which was where Rites of Hadda started from. In fact, one time it was just me and her. I think the first jam was just me and her. So if she hadn't been there at that time, I don't know if this project would have existed at all. We've just recorded an album that's in post-production at the moment, and I'm really pleased with the artistry of that album, not just from me, but I can only speak for myself, but I'm really pleased with it from everyone. But from my point of view, it's the most complete thing that we've made. And also we're on this drive to try and be as ecological and ethical as possible, which is one of the reasons why the sleeves of the Horn God are made from upcycled cardboard, and it's all like plastic-free tape and animal-free glue, and do you know what I mean? We've gone as far because we're using CDs and we're using vinyls that, let's face it, are going to be here after us. So the least we can do is not produce anything else around it. Also, I think like there's a trail to be blazed through the local DIY scene with this. People aren't as conscious as they should be, and and we're guilty of it as well. But it's just like I say, if we can get post-consumer cardboard badges, then there's no reason why other people won't look and think, oh, that's a great idea.
But like everyone I know in this room, like it's all quite distinct, but it's also linked. Like I know Simon because I got into cricket because of a friend I worked with, or two friends I worked with, and had I not gotten into cricket I wouldn't have met Simon, and Simon wouldn't have been in the band.
Okay, well, as we were thinking of different timelines and different thoughts earlier, then there was one person that always stuck in the back of my head. It's not someone that necessarily brought me to DIY punk and that in itself, but it's somebody that's always been in the background and has a kind of unspoken but very important part in Rites of Hadda and in lots of elements of my life actually. So it's someone called Spoon, Visa Spoon, and our first gigs and Spirit of the Age, Paul's band's first gigs, and how we met each other was through gigs that Spoon used to put on. And even now that he's not so active in gig promotion and he doesn't look after venues any longer, there's still some glue that comes around. Like I'm still hearing stories from other people that now are good friends of Rites of Hadda, and then you're like, oh right, I didn't get the connection that actually the reason why you know us is through Spoon. So Cos and Rude Mechanicals and Anarchist Wood, who are all bands that are quite close to us, the reason why we know that is because Spoon used to be in a band with Cos when they were 16 or something like that. When I moved to London, then it was kind of, didn't really know anyone, phoned around a few venues and got a few gigs here and there, but really the spark, that was it, was like, well, we could just put on our own gigs really, and that was a no-brainer because that's what we've been doing since we started.
When I first got a saxophone, there was a guy called Julian Quinn who was a very accomplished guitarist and an excellent songwriter, and he invited me to come and jam and play music with him twice a week when I was a complete beginner. And why he felt the need to be so generous, I don't know, but it was fantastic because he was just let me learn at my own pace playing along with him, and we ended up playing in bands together. So he was hugely influential because I'd never have got going without him.
I was looking back at the timeline that I've written here. My dad unfortunately got unwell and died in 2013, but I sort of had this catalyst moment that go, look, life's too fucking short. My initial way of thinking was let's put together groups of people, groups of bands that could all put their own gigs on. And this is where I mentioned earlier on networking. I would actually put some of those bands in 2014 that were coming up through like their learning process and their apprenticeship, if you like, in those early days, as revitalising the DIY scene. I think I think without a doubt, there's some bands that appeared around those years that really played a part, that are still around today. Not just us, but still around today, that actually revitalised DIY and put together quite a massive network now. And not just a network in London, a network up and down the country where we go, look, let's pick 3 or 4 bands out of, and we might have to travel somewhere and they might have to travel to us or whatever, but, we try to minimise that, of course, but, it's ultimately a group of people that know each other eventually. You work together, you know each other. Some people don't necessarily, gel together, and others do, and that kind of. But you build that network from people that gel together and want to work together, and it seems to have really worked.